Okay, we're back and we have the JR28X on the desk, and we're gonna go in and select a new model and do the basic setup on a new model for, let's say, an F3J kind of sailplane. And you can see I actually have a USB mouse hooked up to the radio, which is really cool because you can get to things really quickly versus using the touchscreen. But another strange feature of the Android-based system is that when you plug this mouse in, you can't type into any of the fields anymore. So you have to actually unplug the mouse to be able to type. So if you want to type a model name, you have to pull the mouse USB adapter out. Anyway, let's go and select a new model. So we'll go into the program pages here, and we're going to go to System and Model Select. RF will be cut. Okay, no problem. And let's create a new model. So you can see I only have one model. It's my VTail Perfection. Here's that picture I was talking about, which is assigned to this model, which you can only see in the Model Select page, which sucks. Okay, make a new model. Create a new model, confirm, yes please. And then you get to select what kind. Don't like choppers, don't want a power plane. Let's go for a sailplane. Wait for it to do its thing. And then it just spit out whatever flight mode it was in. I'm going to leave this blank because, again, I can't type here. Normally you could just touch your finger here and you get this and you can try to type, but with the mouse you can't. So we're going to just call this model blank. Okay, so number 2, and if you wanted to, you could go up here and add an image, but I don't really have an image to add for this, so we'll say no. Okay, so we got a new model going, and we'll just back out of here. And you can see that there's no name here because our model is now named blank. No name again. Alright, so the next thing you'd want to do with a new model is select what kind of wing and tail you have. So I believe it might be on the second page. Yeah, second page of the system menu. There's a wing type. We can click on this and you get tail type, wing type, and spoiler. You know, typical F3J, F3B, F3F sailplane, you don't have spoilers, so you don't really need to mess with this, but if you did have spoilers, you could pick 1 or 2. We'll just leave that alone. Tail. Standard tail, you have a V-tail here, you have a tail with 2 elevator servos, 2 rudder servos, 2 elevator servos, 1 rudder servo. We'll just go with the standard tail. And then we have wing type. And we're going to want 2 ailerons and 2 flaps, but there are a lot of options up to 4 ailerons and 4 flaps available to you. You can see all the different options. Anyway, we're just going to select this guy here. Okay, so let's back out of that. Now I think the next thing that you'd want to get into is setting up your flight modes, because all the other adjustments, your mixing, your trims, if you set your flight modes up as independent of each other, all those values you have to program independently for each flight mode. So you can there is a common setting if you want, but I think most people are going to have independent settings across their flight modes. So that would be the next thing I would do is flight mode. But obviously you'd want to do a bind too. So there is a bind and range page. So you could run through the bind procedure here. You select what model number. Oh, this is 2. You can click bind to bind, and then there's a range check feature here. So let's back out of that. And the next thing we'll do is we will go to the flight mode settings, which is right here. You can see with the basic Sailplane template they give you, they have already set up 4 flight modes, and you can add 11 more if you wish, for a total of 15, which is really great. My old radio would only allow 5 flight modes, and I think the Gropner MZ24 that I tried was 6 or 7. Anyway, this is up to 15. This is the layout of the flight mode page, and over here you have your switch positions to let you know which flight mode is currently on or off. And on the left side of the transmitter here, there's 3 buttons. If you click the middle button in the flight mode page, you get priority settings, which is really cool. And here you can prioritize your flight modes, which is really critical to getting all the switches to work properly, in that you want to flip a switch and have a certain flight mode come on, but you want your landing flight mode to always take priority over any other flight mode, or maybe your launch flight mode or whatever. So you would use the priority setting to make that happen. Alright, I had to pull the USB for the mouse out so I could get in here and type some flight mode names. So let's add 2 more flight modes that you would typically have with a F3J style model, or even a F3B or F3F. So we'll add 1 more flight mode. You can see flight mode 5 pops up, and we'll add 1 more on top of that, so we get flight mode 6. And we'll go in here and we'll click on this guy. Let's backspace, and let's call this one landing. Okay, so we got landing, and then let's set up a zoom flight mode. So we'll call flight mode 6 zoom. Okay, let's see what we have. We have launch, which is great. We have speed, which is great. Thermal, cruise, landing, and zoom. Okay, so what I'm going to do is plug the USB back in so I can use the mouse. So let me do that real quick. Alright, we got a little mousey going again. So after you've created a few more flight modes and you've named them, the next thing you're going to want to do is assign the switches that you'd like to activate them. Now, in the basic template they give you, they sort of pre-assign some switches, which what I do is just go in and basically disable or uncheck the ones they've pre-assigned, because I want to move those to different switches. But before I do that, let's go back. So to get to the switch menu, or switch assignment menu, just click on the switch button next to the flight mode you want. It gives you a picture of the radio. You can click anywhere on this radio to get to the various trims, tabs, and switches in that area of the radio, which is really cool. So over here, this one highlighted in red is the one they've pre-assigned to that flight mode. So we're just going to click on this guy. We're going to uncheck position 1. Position 0 is generally always towards the rear of the radio, and the other positions move forward. So we'll uncheck that. We'll click back. We'll go back again. We're going to go to speed. We're going to click on this guy. Uncheck that. Go back. Let's go to thermal. Uncheck that position. Go back. Cruise. Uncheck that. Back. And these don't have any assigned because these are the 2 flight modes that we just created. So we've cleared all the switches that the radio came up with standard, and let's go in and select the switches that we want to use for our various flight modes. And I'll just do sort of a typical layout that I like to use. So let's start with, we're going to start with launch, zoom, and cruise, because I want to put those all on a 3-position switch on the left upper part of the radio. So we'll select this, the switch, and we get to the switch or stick or knob or trim selection menu. And there's a few options here. There's the logic, which is pretty common to most radios, on, off, or, and. Most of the stuff's going to be or, but there are a few cases where you would use and on or off is simply just on or off. So we'll leave this on or. We'll X out of that. There's a type, there's normal, and there's trigger. Again, probably just using normal versus trigger. And then this, the analog position, is actually if you create your own switches or stick switches. Basically, in the stick switch menu, you can go in and assign a switch to your throttle or flap or rudder, aileron, elevator, the little dials on the sticks, or various other knobs and dials on the radio. And they give you a nice image of the radio. We'll select this this guy, so we'll get the top corner of the radio, and then we select this switch, and this is launch, and we want it to be in position 2, which is all the way forward. So we'll select that, and we'll back out of that. Next thing we'll do is we'll do zoom. So this will be the next mode that you want to go into directly after your launch mode. Again, click on the switch. We're going to click on this top corner of the radio. Click on the switch again. We want the middle position. Back out of that. Back out of this page. And then we'll do the same thing for cruise. Select the corner of the radio. Select the switch. And we want position 0 or all the way back.
Cruise.
And we'll select that. Now let's back out of that, and let's see what we get. So we're already in cruise. As you can see right here, we should go into zoom,
Zoom.
and then launch.
Launch.
Launch,
Zoom.
zoom,
Cruise.
cruise. Great. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, let's say we want to set up our speed or a reflex setting for penetration. So we'll select this. I'm going to put it on this switch right here. So again, select that corner of the radio. Click on this guy, and I want it to be in the forward position. So we'll click on position 1. Back out of that. Back out of that. So that's our speed. And then we'll do the same thing for thermal. And I want this switch right here. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go again position 1. Back out of that. And I've left all the logics on or. They're all normal. We haven't used the analog positions yet, but we're going to get to that right now. Okay, so we've done everything but our landing mode. And this one gets a little more tricky because we're going to want a stick switch for the landing mode. So let's set that up. Okay, let's go back, and we're going to actually click on analog position in our system menu, and this is going to allow us to set up a stick switch on the throttle stick to activate our landing mode. Okay, so they give you various a bunch of stick switch functions or switch functions, and we're just going to get the first one, which is 0, 0. Click on this guy. We'll activate it, and here's the layout of the page. Input. Click on input. We're going to want a device, right? Because we're going to want the stick. Again, you get a picture of the radio, which is really cool. We're going to click on the throttle stick, and we're going to click on the vertical direction of travel right there, and we'll back out of that. And then we have to go in and activate where we want it to turn on. And you can make it turn on and then travel a little farther and then turn off. So it's a pretty cool feature. So we want it off at the very top of the travel. We'll turn that off. And we want it on in the middle and on at full deflection. And if we come in here and select this guy, this will give us a numerical value, right? And you can see the bar coming up, and this is basically where the function turns on. So we're going to go, let's say we're going to go to 90% of the throw. So you have a little bit of leeway right here with your flap stick. So if you just bump it while you're giving rudder input, you're not going to activate your flight mode. But once you get past 10%, the flight mode will turn on. So we have now set up a stick switch for the flight mode. So let's back out of this and go back to the flight mode setting page right here. And we'll select our landing. We'll click on this. We're going to select analog position. And we're going to have the first one with 0, 0, 0. Click on that guy. And we'll back out of this. And let's see, if we move the stick, we should get an on in the landing. And see, we can see I'm moving the stick and it is turning on, and I can move it a little bit at the very top in that 10% and it won't activate. So that's perfect. The next thing we're going to have to do with our flight modes to actually get them all to work is to prioritize them. And I'll show you real quick. We haven't prioritized any of the flight modes, and so a lot of them aren't going to actually work. There's 3 buttons on the left side of the radio by the LCD screen. If you push the middle one in this menu, you'll get the priority settings, and here we can prioritize our flight modes. But before we do that, let's just go back to our home page. Right here is our flight mode widget, and let's see without prioritizing which ones work and which ones don't. So we're in cruise, so we know that works. Let's go to zoom. We got zoom. We got launch. Let's try speed. Speed works.
Cruise. Thermal.
Thermal works.
Cruise.
But our landing does not work. See, because of the priority settings in the radio. So we cannot activate our landing flight mode. So let's go back to flight mode setting page, which is in system, flight mode settings. We'll click the middle button on the left side of the radio, priority, and we're going to want to get landing all the way to the top. So just click on landing, keep clicking on it until it gets all the way to the top. And then let's just go back to our home page and see what we got. Okay, we're in cruise mode, and we're going to move the flap stick.
Landing.
And all of a sudden we get landing mode.
Cruise.
If you move the sticks or the flight mode switches too fast, the radio doesn't really have a chance to use the voice alert. So if you move it really quick,
Landing.
and then you flip something else, it kind of confuses the radio. So
Cruise.
okay, so let's see. Let's just double check, make sure all the flight modes work. We're in cruise. We're going to go to thermal.
Thermal.
We got thermal.
Cruise.
Speed.
Speed. Cruise. Zoom.
Zoom.
Launch.
Launch.
Zoom. Cruise.
Cruise.
Landing.
And landing.
Cruise.
The next thing we're going to do is let's check to make sure that our landing is actually the highest priority flight mode. So let's say we're flying in a contest and we're in thermal mode, right?
Thermal.
And we're sky high in the thermal, and you forget you're in thermal mode, and somehow you manage to come out of the thermal, descend, and enter your landing pattern, and you go to pull flaps. You want to hope that your flaps actually work. So if your flight modes are prioritized correctly, the landing mode will kick in no matter what other flight mode you're in. So let's try.
Landing.
And we get landing in thermal.
Thermal.
And let's try speed.
Landing.
We get landing and speed.
Speed.
Let's try launch. Let's say you're at the winch and you have a line brake really low, and you got to pull the flaps to land your model safely. So we're in launch mode.
Landing.
and we go directly to landing mode.
Launch.
Cool. So we have all the flight modes set up, and we could add a bunch more, and the more you add, the more you have to kind of juggle the priority settings around in the radio. I found that if I add a few more flight modes, I have to actually be conscious of the order of several of the flight modes, not just the highest priority flight mode, to get all of them to engage. And you can also set up multiple switch positions in your flight modes so that you can keep track of your flight modes and have them engage when you'd like them to. You can sort of use a master and slave switch setup to get multiple flight modes to work. For example, you could do that with a launch flight mode. I can just show you that, guys, real quick. If you go into your flight mode setting page, I've set up flight mode 7. We'll call this, let's say this is your launch 2 setting. You could set this up so that when you move your master, let's call this the master switch, into position 2, which is your launch switch. So you could have 2 switches activate your launch 2. So you'd leave that in position 2 just like your other launch mode. We'll back out of that, and you could also use, let's say, like a 3-position switch like this. Let's say you select the middle position, and for your master launch mode, maybe you'd give your master launch mode position 0 or all the way up. That way you could keep this switch in your launch setting, but when you toggle this switch to the middle position, it would actually engage a launch mode 2. And you could even set up another launch mode, another flight mode, call it launch mode 3, in the lower position. And when you toggle this all the way down, you'd get launch mode 3. So there's really great flexibility in the radio for setting up flight modes. I found it fairly easy to use once you get used to it. I would just like to caution that you take great care in setting up your flight modes correctly and prioritizing them properly so that they engage when you need them to engage. You might want to set something up where you can only engage your thermal and maybe speed flight modes when you are in your cruise mode. That way, let's say you're in launch mode and you bump a switch, it's not going to flip into a thermal or speed or some other setting like that. And definitely with your landing flight mode, you want to make sure that that's probably going to be your primary flight mode, so that you always have landing flaps when you need them to stop the airplane, just to keep your airplane safe, to make sure you're consistent in contests, and to keep the people safe around you so you don't overshoot the landing and run into anybody's shin. I think that's it for now, guys. Next time we'll get into some more settings of the radio, maybe some mixing or just basic things like dual rates and travel adjustment, sub trims and things like that. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and maybe you learned a little something about the 28X. If you have one already, or if you're thinking about buying one, you got a little more familiar with the way the radio's laid out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.